Round of applause and welcome them to Malaprop. How did you know?
Well, I was so touched that you asked me to come talk to you about this book because I absolutely adored it. It was #1 on my TBR pile, even if I didn't know you, because it is just exactly what I have been looking for. Short and sweet. I've had a short attention span. I don't know if it's the fact that I'm a mom of a 6- and a 4-year-old or if it's COVID holdover or what. But my attention span has been short. I just want something fun, romantic, hilarious, and that you gave me exactly what I wanted.
I did it just for you.
But this really felt like I think I have read every single thing you've written, even some stuff that has not been published. And to me, this was such a perfect adult debut for you for original fiction, because it just feels like it combines everything I loved about your epic YA books with more romance, a little bit of that like Star Wars energy and flair, and it has such a great sense of humor, also a sophisticated sense of humor, and just such well thought out twists that I'm dying to talk about and I'm going to refrain from. But yes, I'm going to get this for pretty much everyone I know this Christmas, because everyone I know has short attention spans too right now.
Right.
Why don't you start off by just giving us a short little description of the book?
So Full Speech and Crash Landing is about Ada Lamarr, who is named for Ada Lovelace and Hedy Lamarr. So two brilliant women who also happen to be very beautiful. Anyway, Ada Lamarr is in chapter 1 on the very first page. She is on her ship that has been breached, so all the oxygen has left it. She has teeny tiny bit left in her tank, and she is desperately calling an SOS. And a government agent picks it up, doesn't believe her at first because she is in a highly sensitive area where there is some secret happening, and eventually he does actually believe her, and they save her just in the nick of time, and that is just in chapter 1. And after that, they have to go and retrieve the hidden thing on the planet that she was orbiting around, except not everything is as it seems in any way, shape, or form. Everyone lies.
Okay, all right, my first extremely important question.
Yes.
How do you really feel about lentils?
Oh, for a second there, I thought you meant like an architectural detail. I was like, they're fine. Lentils. Yeah. That's a great question. So one of the things that my agent actually really commented on a lot was that Ada is obsessed with food, like constantly obsessed with food. If there is a pile of gold and like donuts, she's going for the donuts. She's obsessed with food. And one of the things is she does see lentils. But I made I was trying to be super sneaky, and I don't know if anybody's caught this one yet, because I also try to be super sneaky with Across the Universe. So with Across the Universe, there was a curse word called Frex, and I had just made up this curse word, and it was my super sneaky way of hinting that more time had passed on the ship than you realize, because slang changes, and nobody caught that, and they all thought I was just afraid to say the F word. I was like, no, I was trying to give a clue. With the food thing, I was trying to give a clue. She's obsessed with food because she's been starved. And so she's been the kind of person who hasn't had food before.
Yeah.
And so she's very obsessed with it. So, and also at the time, I quite liked lentils.
I will say, yes, it's so interesting because she has been eating like worm-based gruel on her ship.
Recycled
And so when she goes to the new ship and they actually have these amazing foods like lentils, which are pretty basic. And I started being like, God, those sound good. I could go for some lentils right now.
They're surprisingly good, and they have lots of protein.
Better than worm gruel. Okay, so you said in your author's note that you were inspired to write this out of spite.
Yes.
So my cynical author question is, which is the greater motivator, spite or paychecks?
Oh, that was like I was prepared to say spite immediately, and then you brought up money, and I was like, well, actually, yeah, I can be bought.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Tell us about the spite, though.
Okay, so this book is actually very, very young, even though it's short. It's very new, because about this time last year, I was in Phoenix Fan Fusion, which is like a Comic-Con that takes place in the city of Phoenix, and I was there in a professional capacity, so I had to be very polite and have my, outward smile on and everything. And somebody came up to me and was incredibly rude, like incredibly insulting. And I was there as a professional, so I just had to be like, okay, that's your opinion, and just sort of take it. And he basically was like, you couldn't really write a book that was fast paced and fun and twisty and all this stuff. And I was like, I will prove you wrong if I die trying. So immediately I had like at conventions, we always have like, you know, drinks for the authors after and all that stuff. I blew everyone off. I was like, see you, bye, out. I went straight to my hotel room and I wrote like a third of the book that night. And the only thing that tripped me up was like the twisty part of the mystery. So I called my poor husband up in the middle of the night. I was like, I can't figure out this twisty mystery. And he was like, what about X? And I was like, great. And so I just stayed up all night writing. I had the entire book written in a month.
Amazing.
It was awesome. And then I was like, now I have to sell it to prove that one random stranger wrong. And he had no idea, like zero idea that the song is about him, but absolutely 100% is.
So it is a novella, which is, it's maybe like, I don't know, a little more than half of what a length of a regular novel, would you say? Somewhere around there. What made you decide to write it as a novella?
I did not know what I was doing at all in any way, shape, or form. I started off with a story, and the whole premise in my head was I have to keep it smart and funny and twisted, like all the things the guy said I couldn't do. So I was like, well, I'll prove you wrong. And the whole mystery sort of wrapped up in about 20,000 words, 200 pages-ish. I was like, well, that's not quite the length of a novel. So I actually sat down and I sketched out how to make it in a whole book. And so I was like, so this will be mystery one, and then the middle of the book will be another mystery, and then there'll be this other mystery. And I gave my agent this book and then like the rest of the chapters of it. I was like, so this is just the beginning and I can do more. She's like, or it could be a novella and you could do 3. And I was like, oh, that sounds like a great idea. Let's do that.
I love it.
That's how it turned out.
I think it's brilliant. I love the idea of just these short, punchy books.
And it's so much easier to edit.
Oh, I bet.
She's like, can you change this one chapter? It's like, yeah, it's just one out of few.
And it's such a satisfying read as a standalone.
Yeah, I think so.
It's clear at the end that the story will continue, but you don't at all feel like there's this huge cliffhanger by any means. So I mean, I think it just works beautifully as the first of 3 novellas.
Excellent.
So there is a twist that we have been kind of hinting at, and I'm not gonna say what it is, but I felt like it had a very Sherlock Holmes kind of feel to it, where you were laying these elaborate clues. And Beth had told me the premise of this book and the twist several months before I read it, and I forgot. I didn't even connect until I got to the end of the book. Like, that's how good the clues are laid. Even knowing the twist, I still didn't get it. Remember it. So how do you go about layering in those clues so that you have somewhat of an unreliable narrator?
So the best thing about being able to be the mastermind and write the story is that I can appear smarter than I am. So I just write it as I come. And then when I'm like, oh, wait, that should have been a clue, I can go back and edit and just add it in. So everybody else is like, oh, wow, she saw that on page 1. And I'm like, yeah, I did. But I absolutely had no idea what I was doing. It was all in the edits where I was able to sort of sprinkle those in.
Okay. Yeah. So Ada has a very sarcastic sense of humor, which I found to be very endearing. I really loved it. It also felt like perhaps she was sort of deflecting a bit with her humor. Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about how she uses, or how you used her humor to kind of convey deeper parts of her personality?
Yeah, it does come back to the idea that if you're going to tell a lie, it's hard to hold that up. But if you can tell a half truth, that's a lot easier to keep up with. So she had to sort of sacrifice some of the lie to tell a little bit of the truth to make that work out. But also, I really just wanted to have a character who could say what she actually thought, because I mean, the inspiration for it came from being in a place where I couldn't say what I really wanted to say, because I was being professional. I was like the polite lady in the situation, so I couldn't say what I wanted to. So Ada always gets to say exactly what she wants to, and even when she reveals a piece of herself, it's calculated and it's her choice. She never says anything she doesn't want to.
So she's kind of your avatar in a sense.
A little bit.
Literary avatar.
There was a lot of like, yes, she actually said it.
The catharsis.
She says the inside thoughts out loud.
So you mentioned Ada's name, Ada Lamarr's name, as being a bit of an Easter egg coming from famous female scientists.
Yes.
Are there any other little Easter eggs that
Yeah.
you might have planted?
Did you,
Can
you know the answer to this one? That was a snuck-in question. But yeah, totally. First of all, Rian White is named for Rian Johnson and Benoit Blanc for White. So it was sort of a glass onion, twisty mystery like nod. And
Oh.
I adore Glass Onion. And if you like Glass Onion, particularly in the way that they make fun of basically Elon Musk the whole time, the entire plot of book 2 of this trilogy is all like trashing Elon Musk. It's fantastic. I had such a good time. I'm only staying on Twitter long enough to advertise that specific book. So there was Rian White, who is named after Rian Johnson and his character. There's also some Easter eggs that don't necessarily translate unless you're in my brain, because the book I was writing before this one it was also science fiction and it didn't sell, and the ship on that one was named Glory, and so my little nod to the book that didn't make it is I named her ship Glory. And then also there's a few nods to some of my favorite television and sci-fi and movies. So there's Star Wars, there's a nod to George Lucas in there. If you know some of the things he said before, particularly about Carrie Fisher, there's a little nod to that in one of the chapters. And there's a nod to Firefly. Firefly was one of my absolute favorites always. And I wanted to have a scene because Ada Lamarr is obsessed with food. And one of my favorite scenes in Firefly is the Kaylee scene where she gets a box of strawberries. And that's like the most precious thing she could have is fresh strawberries. So I actually put in a peach in this book as like the homage to that. But it was also a little bit of an homage to Night of the Witch, because Night of the Witch is a book that I co-wrote. It takes place in medieval Germany. And the second book, which is going to be out in October, so come on by again. In the second book, they go on another medieval road trip, basically, and we were researching places to go. And I had actually been to Germany with my mama, and we went to a little town called Cochem, and they had these red vineyard peaches, and that was like the most like delicate, you know what I'm trying to say, and it was like unique to that area. And I was like, okay, I can put in these red vineyard peaches, and that's like bringing medieval Germany in my sci-fi book. It's a good little tie, except they're not sold anywhere else. Anywhere. I went on Amazon, I went to specialty food stores, I contacted Whole Foods. Like everywhere I went, they're like, we've never heard of this peach, what is wrong with you? And eventually I went through my pictures from our trip and found the exact shop that I had went to and sent the guy an email using Google Translate, because I'm not that good in German. I sent this email, I was like, hey, can you sell me some of this? I'll pay for shipping. And he wrote back and he went around his store with his cell phone and was taking pictures. I'm like, which one do you want? Picture A or picture B? And I was like, so sweet. So I ended up actually buying a case of the jam.
Oh, that's amazing.
And you get it.
What?
Holy, first ever
Oh my gosh, thank you.
So I went on this quest to Germany for
Oh
these
my
peaches.
gosh. Okay, what is this? Okay, do you know what that
So
is?
I do. It's Weinberg Peach, which means wine. Berg is like the red color, red wine peach.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I'm so excited.
So they're really real. And because I can only have one jar, it came from Germany, I did bribe you. I'm going to bribe you guys with space time for you. So all you have to do is be nice to me and I'll give you cookies. Okay. All that is with one question.
No, I know. Okay, I have a few more though for you. So at the very end, after the story wraps up, there's some sort of found footage documents there, and they sort of both enhance the story when you're thinking back on it, and they also give some clues for what's going to happen next. Did you always know that you were going to include those at the end? And why did you just happen to like found footage? Or
I love found footage. One of my favorite books is Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff's Illuminate. That's also science fiction. It's almost an entire narrative done on found footage. I've always loved that medium. I like playing with things and pushing the envelope of what you can do in a book. So I knew I always wanted those. I did not know how it was going to play out over the course of the trilogy. So basically, the whole book is told from Ada's point of view, and it's very close to her point of view because she's running a heist in a con. Like, I can't broaden that horizon too much. But the last few pages are from Ryan's point of view and official documents that he's sending with footnotes in his voice. And it was so much fun to do it in the first one. And then I got to the second book and I was like, oh, except now I can't do that again. And I had to completely alter how I do it. So it got more complicated as I went. And had I actually thought it through, I might not have done it, but I'm really glad I did now.
I think it was so fun how a lot of times I've seen those found footage books and I do like them, but a lot of times they're quite dry. Like it's sort of just giving more information, or maybe there's a bit of voice and humor like in the document itself. But the way you did the footnotes with his actual opinion on what was happening was just so clever. It was delightful.
I really enjoyed peeling off his mask because he is my Sherlock character. I pitched this as Sherlock meets River Song for those of you who like Doctor Who. So he's my Sherlock character, and he's very like I was at that convention. He was very like proper and polite to everyone's face, but inside he's internally screaming.
Yes, yes. So you've written quite a bit of sci-fi in your career. So at this point, when you're writing a book like these, how much of it is like technical information that you feel really confident with because you've done so much research, and how much of it is still like your own creative, more like inventive sort of component to it?
Yeah, I don't even know anymore because I'm such a nerd. I really enjoy learning about science and space and things like that. Much like with Night of the Witch, I just really enjoy learning about medieval history. And I'm like, oh, this is fascinating. These books were from Rome and things like that. So I don't know where the line goes between what I've like am inventing and what I've gotten like from research and how the story evolves. I just have a good time, and I write until I get stuck, and then I scream at my husband for a long time. And he's like, calm down. What if you do this? I'm like, oh yeah. So it all depends out.
Nice. Okay, and then my final question is that this is a very busy year for you, publication-wise and writing-wise. You've got Full Speed to a Crash Landing. You have the second book. What's the second book's title?
Fate of Magic.
How
to Steal a Galaxy.
How to Steal a Galaxy is coming out in December.
Yes.
And then you've got your Night of the Witch Romantasy YA trilogy.
Yes.
And the sequel to that,
Fate of Magic in October.
And you also have the Star Wars picture book.
Yes, also in December on the exact same day as How to Steal a Galaxy.
So go ahead and put it on your calendar. You come back in
And I'm
October
self-publishing too.
And self-publishing too.
Yes.
Under your name?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Excellent. So how the heck do you do it?
Sheer desperation. I am broke. Part of it was just like luck and timing. Like this was a very short book, obviously, so I was able to write it much quicker. And then I thought we were selling it on proposal, and potentially it would be like one big book, and they'd give me a year to write it. And instead they're like, yeah, we like the novella format. What if we get this one out in summertime, and can you have the next one out ready by fall? And I was like, yes, there's a paycheck involved. I can do that. So that was just like a pure luck that I had a publisher who wanted it really fast. The picture book is one that has been done for a year. So I just wrote the text for it. I didn't do the pictures. Nobody wants me to do pictures. So that one it was just the artist had to have her time to do it. And then Fate of Magic was something, it was actually finished last year, and I co-wrote it, so it's a little bit easier. I only had to do half the book. She did the other half. But yeah, it's just a mix of luck and timing, and
I'm impressed. You can get through all of that. That's so exciting. Okay, so that's what we have to look forward to.
Yes. Oh, and in all of your books, you have a little card that looks like this, and you can see pre-order art on the back. There's a password. I'll cover it up for you guys on the iPad. There's a password to look at the pre-order art that's coming out. So.
For this book?
For How to Steal a Galaxy and Fate of Magic.
Oh, okay. Yeah. You might have to give me a sneak peek later on.
Yeah.
Okay, well, excellent. Well, I think we're ready to take some questions from the audience and anybody who might be at home.
Jackson Jets. Where did the name come from?
Jack, would you like to raise your hand?
Oh,
That's my son, Jackson. So I snuck his name into the book for that.
okay.
And of course, it's going to be the thing that explodes.
I was so, because she keeps repeating Jackson Jets. I have Jackson Jets.
Yeah, that was all for the kiddo.
Yeah. Congratulations, you're in a book.
The picture book is dedicated to him, so it's technically his picture book.
So you mentioned calling your husband in the middle of the night. You also mentioned screaming at your husband.
Yeah.
So, okay, as the husband of a writer, what are some of the things that he does when he reads your work that is helpful for you, or that if you feel supported when he does it?
Yeah, so we actually have a joke in our house where we call it rubber ducking, because there's an old engineering term where if you can't figure out the problem, you pick up a rubber duck and explain the problem to the duck, and then you figure it out. And so I come up to him all the time, and he'll stop me halfway through my rant, and he's like, do you want a solution or do you want a rubber duck? And so sometimes I just get him to shut up, and then I word vomit all over him, and then in the process I figure it out. And sometimes when he's like, what do you need a solution to, then I have to figure out what the actual problem is, and then we can kind of brainstorm together. So knowing when to just sit there and take it is a great feature of a husband.
I'm gonna take that rubber duck terminology
I like it a
with
lot.
my husband, because sometimes I forget to clarify with him too, like, no, this, I just need like a sound for it, like, I just need a rubber duck. I don't actually, because it's not that I don't want his opinion, it's that I know every aspect of the story. Like, I just kind of know the parameters and what'll work and what won't. And he'll come up with like really brilliant ideas, but I just instantly know it's not gonna work. And so I just shut that down and
Yeah.
done.
But and then sometimes just by nature of talking through the problem,
Yeah.
you figure out an aspect you didn't know before.
Definitely.
A virtual audience question.
Yay.
Okay.
So the virtual audience wanted to know if you will ever be writing any more Across the Universe stories. Not necessarily Amy and Elder's story, but are you going to expand it? Are you going to? Oh, that's amazing.
Well, there is more to their story, and in this book, there's a slight mention and hint of Across the Universe. The world system is based on the same system. So she mentions Centauri Earth, for example, which is the planet where Amy and Elder were going to. And the second book, which is called How to Steal a Galaxy, is basically the Met Gala on a different planet. And they are going to a history museum, and one of the displays will reveal something that happens with Amy and Elder. And they go and visit this display, and she's thinking about like, oh, this person did this on Centauri Earth, and that is within that world. I'm very excited.
That's super exciting.
I got a virtual audience question. Nobody else got a question.
So I haven't read the book yet, but I was like totally sold on the title. Where did you come up with, where did the title come from?
We, for a long time, it was called Jetpack Con. And my kid pitched the questionable con. He was very proud of that one. We ended up making like a list because I had so many ideas for it. We had literally like 50 titles in the list. And How to Steal a Galaxy became like the front runner. Like everybody was like, my agent and her assistant, my editor, they were like, oh yeah, we like this one. And I liked it, but I knew it fit better for the second book. So I was like, I am in panic mode and must find a different title before they put the wrong title on the wrong book. And it just sort of like in the word jumble of all the different titles, it sort of crashed together.
I remember we were on a author like Slack channel.
Yeah.
And you had been throwing some out. And I think some were like full speed, some were crash landing. And then it was like, oh, it just kind of just came
merged.
together.
I think it happened on the group chat that we were on.
Yeah, I remember because we were all like, oh, full speed to crash landing. Like that.
I enlisted every group chat. I was like, here's everything, somebody help. But I think it was that one. And that one ended up being, and for a while it wasn't. And then I just kept coming back to it. And I was like, yeah, it's gotta be that one. But it was really to save How to Steal a Galaxy for the second book, because it really fits better for that one, because she's going to the Met Gala thing to steal something. So,
It's a great title.
thank you. I had to fight a little bit for it, but I think it was good.
Has number 3 been announced with title yet? And when do we get to read that one too?
I don't know if it's been announced, but I'll tell you anyway, because I've had sugar. So, the last one is called Last Chance to Save the World, and it will be out in March. Okay.
I'll try to wait.
So the other virtual question right now is, do you find it more difficult to write a novella or a full-length novel?
Novellas are so much easier. They're so much shorter, and so like especially when it comes to the editing part of it, because when you edit the book, you have to have the whole book like in your head and pull all the pieces together, and it just takes up a lot less room. And it's so much shorter and easier. I really enjoy it, so I'm hoping that people like this, and I get to keep writing mysteries with them because it was so much fun.
I want to try my hand at novellas now. I have written short stories. I like that. And then I've written long form novels, and I tend to write long novels, like 120,000 words. And I keep telling myself, why do I do that? Like, you could pay the same for an 80,000 novel. It's like an 80,000 word novel. And so I keep telling myself, okay, this next series I write, they're all gonna be like 80,000 words. They all end up even bigger than they were before. So I actually think it would be a real challenge to sort of limit the scope and.
Well, one of the things I did to prepare for this is I really am a fan of Martha Stewart's Murderbot novellas. I took the first Murderbot and I broke it down chapter by chapter. I listed out every chapter and then just a sentence of what happened to kind of get what her pacing was, because her pacing is really, really tight. And then once I did that, I was like, oh, it has this number of chapters. And this is where it was very physical, and this is where it was very emotional. And I sort of reverse outlined based on that.
Yeah.
It made it a lot less intimidating.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
It was fun.
So you're writing the sci-fi genre. I would say it's like a mature genre where there's lots and lots of books you can reference. What excites you in new sci-fi that comes out?
Oh, that's an excellent question. I am most excited by the new voices and the diversity that we're getting in storytelling. Because for a long time, sci-fi was sort of dominated by a certain group of people, and now we have so many more voices, like different colors, different backgrounds, different world experiences, different genders. And sci-fi is where we really push the envelope in a lot of ways. And I always like to say that this is going off of Rudine Bishop's theory of all books are windows or doors. That you can either see through them and see somebody who you've never had a life like that, or you can, it's an entry point and you can walk in and go through the door. I think sci-fi also becomes a mirror, because all sci-fi is a reflection of our time. So as our times grow more complicated and as more people have more voices and the ability to speak more, it becomes that much more interesting. And there are so many fascinating, like Becky Chambers is a fantastic example of this, not just with The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, that's a long title too, not just with that one, which had a lot of different perspectives of different worlds, but even in the Monk and Robot books, where your main characters are literally a person and a robot, and that's pretty much it the whole way through. She still has something important to say within the context of that narrow scope, and it's just brilliant.
Are there differences in plotting between a novel and a novella? Do you find yourself having to keep yourself from putting too many plot points into it?
Yeah, I think what helped me with this specific one was that I knew going in that the character had a secret, and I knew that there was going to be a mystery, and that was a little bit easier to contain for my brain. But it was definitely a difference in plotting and figuring out the pace to make the ending not too abrupt. I think that was where I had the biggest challenge on that, because I can build up the story and add details and everything, but it had to end. And I didn't want the ending to be unsatisfactory. And I needed it to be shocking without being abrupt. And that was the hardest thing to pace for a novella length.
There's a lot of different plotting techniques that we have studied, like the 8 block or the Save the Cat.
Right.
Do you think that those would still work for a novella, or would you, like, in just kind of shrinking down, you know, the time spent on each of those plot points, or do you think it would require like an entirely new type of plot system?
I don't know. I didn't use it for this. And I often I call it my 4-act structure. Like, we all have our own little structure tricks. And for most novels, I have like, here's what happened in Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. And this one, because it was a mystery, so it was a little bit more linear. But really what helped the most was looking at other novellas and breaking them down chapter by chapter and finding that balance of action and emotion. And also, I think because I was using Murderbot, the sort of depth, the mirror that you can reflect the world. So that those things got added in because I was thinking about structure and where can I put in something that shows our world today, but as an allegory within this greater world. Yeah.
Do we have any more questions?
Oh, one was actually gonna ask one. So you mentioned that you wrote this book out tonight.
Yes.
What emotion normally motivates you to write?
Usually it's like a what if question.
Okay.
And I'll, like with Night of the Witch, Sarah and I both happen to come across at the same group chat that I'm on with Megan. We both happened to come across this article about the witch trials of Trier. And we had never heard of them before because in America, we were only ever taught the Salem witch trials, or at least in my school. And so we were talking about that and they're like, well, what if a witch was really real? And then that sort of spun out into the story. And the same way with almost all of my books, it's like with Across Universe, it's like, what if the twist at the end that spoils across the universe. That's where the whole book came from. And it's always these sort of like what if, or like a challenge of like, oh, I want to get to this scene. But yeah, this one's less fight. Usually I'm much more gregarious and like thinking about others and like how interesting and fascinating. This one I'm just like, fight.
Are there any more questions?
What is Megan working on next? We made it through Malice House Compendium, so what do we have?
Yes, yes. So my most recent series was the Malice House Compendium, which is Malice House, and then the sequel is Midnight Showing, which is about a woman who's an aspiring illustrator and starts to illustrate a found secret manuscript she finds and sort of awakens dark demonic forces in the process. And then the second one is sort of this similar, but it moves into old Hollywood, kind of the golden age of Hollywood, spooky silver screen type stuff. So yeah, I am still in the spooky brain set. I've been working with Disney to expand the Nightmare Before Christmas world. So last year I wrote the novelization of the movie for the 30th anniversary and loved doing it. It was fantastic. And at the time, an author who I happened to know, Shay Earnshaw, had been contracted with them to write a spin-off series based on Sally, the ragdoll. And it was a fantastic book called Long Live the Pumpkin Queen. And it was so well received and I adored it. Well, Shay ended up not being able to continue the series. So they asked me, since they'd already worked with me on similar books, if I would pick up that series. So I was delighted to do that. So we just finished editing the second book, which will come out next summer. And then I'm just about to start writing the third book in that series. And it's such a thrill because I actually get to create new characters and new worlds, new town that they go to, and get notes back from Tim Burton's assistant to the assistant to the assistant. Yeah, it's a real, I love that movie so much, and it's just a dream to get to write in it.
I can ask one more question, unless anybody's got one.
All you?
All right, so this is actually for both of you, because what you just mentioned. How different is it working with an IP versus working with your original property?
I think for me, having more of the parameters, restrictions that you have, which I actually like I've done a lot of retellings before, and I like kind of being bound by something. Like if the sky's the limit, I kind of go a little spin out of control. So I like having, okay, this is the world that I have to work in. These are pre-established characters. The main difference for me is really deeply developing the outline ahead of time. Disney requires that just because they want to make sure that what you're writing is gonna fit, and they have so many other Nightmare Before Christmas comic books and pop-up books and everything planned and video games that they have to make sure that what I'm writing isn't gonna like contradict anything else. And so I do a lot of plotting for my original fiction as well, but I always leave it like, it could change, and it does change a lot. But for this, it really does kind of have to be pretty set in stone right from the start. So like thinking through before I even start writing, like deeply thinking through what's the emotional development going to be, what are the plot points going to be, all that world building, and getting it all sort of pre-approved, which then I find makes the drafting process a lot smoother, because you do already know that they're not going to have a problem with these things. Like they've already agreed that this is going to be it. Like sometimes when you write your original fiction and it veers off a little bit from what you told your editor, and then you give it to your editor and they say, what's this? This is not what we agreed to. And so it's, in a way, it's really nice to know you're all on the same page right from the beginning.
Yeah. Actually, writing for Star Wars is what taught me how to outline. I never wrote to an outline before Rebel Rising. Rebel Rising was the very first one. And it was because it was a requirement. They're like, of course we're gonna need your outline. I was like, of course I can totally do that. And like had to figure out outlines all of a sudden. But I found the process much simpler. Like there was no second guessing, and the writing was much quicker because all the decisions had been made. Like I just had to present them and like artistically render them, but all the major plot points and decisions had been made. And there were what the biggest learning curve for writing with Star Wars is that they want me to be more creative than I originally anticipated. Because I was like, I did all the deep research. I mean, I already love Star Wars anyway. I was doing all the deep research of like, well, this planet could do this. And they're like, why don't you just make up a planet? I was like, oh, I can do that. That's loud. Okay, I'm making a wall. So it was a little more freeing than I thought. And Star Wars really respects the writing craft. So they're like always, when you get a manuscript back, there's like 15 or 20 people have made comments on it because it has to go through all the different checks. And then always the last comment is, well, whatever Beth approves. And I'm like, don't give me power. I'm not ready for this power. So that part's a little intimidating, but yeah, it's writing within the constraints of it. Yeah, it's fun. Yeah. Yeah.
Naturally, are you a plotter or a pantser? And that's for both, or?
Plotter, definitely. I have to know. I have tried pantsing, and I sit down and just stare at a blank screen, and nothing happens. I've got to have a pretty detailed outline, at least chapter by chapter. I might not know what happens in the whole book or have thought through that, but I've thought through the next 5 chapters, and not just plot wise what I want to happen, but I'll also put in bits of dialogue that I find, will work there, or emotional reveals that I want to happen, that sort of thing.
It depends on the book for me. All the Star Wars ones have to be outlined. The ones I co-write with Sarah, because it's 2 people, we have to come up with a plan. Those are always outlined. And then everything else for me is 50-50. Like this one had no outline. It was pure rage. But then when I got to the second one, I know, it was a little scary, but I didn't have any risk involved because nobody knew it was going to happen. Like it was such a whim that I was like, there's no expectations on anybody. And if I fail, like nobody knows but me. But then for the sequel, I did have to go back and plot because when I was originally thinking of this as one book, the middle was the short bit. And if I wanted to make it a whole novella, I had to add something. And that one was really difficult because I didn't know what to add because I knew what the third book was going to be. So I added explosions, as one does. As one does. So yeah, it just depends on the book. For me, it's a little bit of both. Museum of Magic was a book that I wrote during the pandemic because when the pandemic happened, my D&D group broke up because we couldn't meet up anymore. And I got all the dice. And so I started writing on Patreon, chapter by chapter, Museum of Magic, and at the end of every chapter, every decision was made by the dice roll, so I couldn't outline in advance. And then at the end of every chapter, I had my readers vote on which direction, so it was literally impossible to plan out anything on that one. So it was a fun experiment. And all of my Patreons voted incorrectly once, and so then I had to write a sequel. The whole point of the book was don't trust the Fae, and we're halfway through the book, I'm like, I think we should trust the Fae. And so I had to write a whole sequel for that, and that's one of the ones coming out this year.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Any more thoughts, feelings? I have a question. You were talking about how you think through in advance your character development and where they're arcing. Can you talk a little bit about your process? You said you think deeply about it, and I always find that the thinking deeply part can be hard when you don't have like a structure for it. And how do you think about that?
Staring off into space.
I do that a lot.
Yeah, I really do. I call it a zero draft now. I got that from a friend of ours, Amy Kaufman, but I think it's a known
Yeah, Alan
idea.
does that too.
Yeah, so the concept of a zero draft is somewhere between an outline and a first draft, where you do include bits of dialogue, or you do include maybe paragraphs of description, or some brainstorming that or some research that you've put in. And so my zero draft can be 30, 40,000 words. And then it's more just sort of fleshing it out. So I find that helpful, but to even get to the point of the zero draft, I really do just space out. Like a lot of times while I'm going to sleep at night, I'll stay up for 2 hours in my head, just thinking, just daydreaming, basically, just thinking through how I want it to happen. And I find that is more organic, then it creates a more interesting, organic, exciting story than if I'm just at my computer, like kind of trying to force it a little bit. Yeah, just something that would entertain me falling asleep at night, I think would entertain readers.
Yeah, much the same thing. Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much.